The enormous crystal halls of the Galactic Council station buzzed with nervous energy as creatures from 4 to 7 different worlds sat in their special seats. The shiny floors showed the glowing patterns of the Velthari people while the robot-like Kogari made clicking sounds with their metal arms. Admiral Thekmor from the powerful hegemony walked to the center stage. He had 4 strong arms that moved as he talked to everyone. "Dear council members," he said in a proud voice, "we found a new planet that we can take over and add to our space empire. The planet is called Earth, and it sits in something the locals call the Sol system." Old Councillor Velnaz from the ancient Cathari people felt worried. Her thin, see-through wings pulled closer to her body. When she heard the name Earth, old memories from thousands of years ago started coming back to her mind. These were scary memories that her people had passed down from parent to child for many generations. Thekmor kept talking, and his voice showed he thought very little of these Earth creatures. The things living there call themselves humans. Our spy ships tell us they are very simple and backward. They cannot travel faster than light speed. They fight each other in separate countries instead of working together. They use basic weapons that just shoot metal pieces very fast. They burn old dead plants for energy and talk to each other using radio waves. Many of the alien council members started making sounds like laughter. The snake-like Corvan people twisted their long bodies in ways that showed they thought this was funny. To them, humans sounded like children playing with sticks and stones. But Velnaz stood up, and her voice was serious and deep like someone who had lived for thousands of years. "Wait," she said. "There are old stories about creatures like this. Very old warnings that the first space-traveling peoples told their children. Stories about a type of being that makes fighting into beautiful art. A species that uses every battle to learn how to fight even better next time." Admiral Thekmor's main eyes became thin and angry. "Elder Velnaz, I mean no disrespect, but your people's fairy tales have nothing to do with real war. Our scanning ships show us that their best weapons are simple bombs and flying metal bullets. They can barely leave their own planet's gravity. Most of their flying machines still need to burn fuel to stay in the air." The argument went on for many hours. Different alien species stood up to give their thoughts. Some agreed with Thekmor that humans seemed weak and easy to defeat. Others listened to Velnaz and felt worried about attacking a species they did not understand. The room filled with strange sounds as creatures with different kinds of voices debated back and forth. But everyone knew what would happen in the end. The hegemony was the strongest military force in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of planets using the same methods every time. They would arrive with huge ships, destroy the local military, demand surrender, and then take over. It had worked on every world they had ever attacked. The younger council members had never seen the hegemony lose a battle. Their war machines were legendary throughout the galaxy. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and conquer. Their weapons could destroy entire cities with single shots. How could primitive humans with metal bullets and chemical rockets possibly stand against such power? As the debate continued, Velnaz kept trying to warn them. She spoke about ancient texts that described warrior species. She talked about old poems that told of creatures who learned from every defeat and turned their pain into strength. But her words sounded like mythology to most of the council members. The Corvan representative hissed with amusement. "Elder, you speak of legends and stories. We deal in facts. Our senses show humans fighting each other with weapons that were outdated 1,000 years ago by galactic standards. They ride in metal boxes that roll on round wheels. They fly in machines that need wings to stay up. This will be the easiest conquest in hegemony history." Other council members nodded in agreement. The evidence seemed clear. Humans were divided, primitive, and weak. They spent most of their time fighting each other instead of exploring space or developing better technology. They were perfect targets for integration into the hegemony empire. Finally, the vote came. One by one, the alien species raised their hands, tentacles, claws, or other body parts to show their agreement. The invasion of Earth was approved by a large majority. As the council session ended, Velnaz stood one more time. Her ancient voice carried across the huge room as she gave one final warning. "Admiral Thekmor, in the oldest books of my people, there is a saying about species like these humans. It goes, those who are made strong by endless fighting are not conquered by others, they become the conquerors." Thekmor waved 2 of his 4 hands to dismiss her words. He was already thinking about his glorious victory. He imagined the parades and celebrations that would happen when he returned with news of another successful conquest. He thought about how easy it would be to defeat creatures who still used gunpowder and steel. As the alien representatives began to leave, something interesting happened in the high balconies where some species liked to watch from the shadows. Several groups of aliens began quietly making bets with each other. But they were not betting on how quickly the hegemony would win. Instead, they were betting on how long it would take for this invasion to become a famous story of disaster that would be told throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The die was cast, and the hegemony fleet began preparing for what they believed would be their easiest conquest ever. 3 weeks passed, and the hegemony's huge war fleet came out of hyperspace travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. It was an impressive sight that had scared countless worlds into giving up without a fight. 12 massive capital ships led the way, followed by 40 medium-sized cruisers and more than 200 smaller attack ships. They moved together in a triangle shape that looked like a giant spear pointing at Earth. Admiral Thekmore stood on the control deck of his biggest ship, called the Dominion's Edge. Through the large windows, he could see the blue and green planet getting bigger as they got closer. Earth looked peaceful and beautiful, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. The Admiral smiled, thinking this would be his easiest victory ever. "Tell all ships to get ready," Thekmore ordered his crew. "We will use our normal attack plan. First, we shoot at their military bases with light weapons. Then we tell them to surrender or we will destroy everything." The alien weapons officer pressed buttons on his control panel. Bright energy beams shot out from the hegemony ships toward Earth. These beams were meant to hit what their computers said were the biggest military bases on the planet. The Admiral expected the humans to panic and beg for mercy within hours. But what happened next shocked every alien on every ship. "Admiral!" shouted the tactical officer, his voice shaking with fear and surprise. "The planet is shooting back at us." Around Earth's orbit were many small objects that the hegemony had thought were simple communication satellites. The aliens had ignored them because they looked old and harmless. But suddenly, these objects came to life. They were not communication devices at all, they were hidden weapons that had been waiting quietly in space. Long metal rods shot out from these hidden platforms at incredible speeds. The rods were made of tungsten, one of the hardest metals known. They moved so fast they were almost like bullets made of lightning. The hegemony ships had energy shields designed to stop laser beams and plasma bolts, but these shields were completely useless against solid metal moving at such tremendous speed. The first hegemony cruiser that got hit simply disappeared. One moment it was there, a proud warship with hundreds of alien crew members. The next moment, there was nothing but scattered metal pieces and glowing gas floating in space. Thekmore's mouth fell open in shock. "That's impossible," he whispered. Then he became angry and scared. "Send all our fighter ships. Attack their flying machines." From Earth's surface, thousands of human aircraft rose up to meet the alien fighters. The hegemony pilots expected an easy battle. Human planes used old chemical fuel instead of advanced energy systems. They needed wings to fly and made loud noises as they moved through the air. By galactic standards, they were ancient technology. But the human pilots flew their machines like they were part of their own bodies. They performed turns and rolls and dives that should have killed them from the extreme forces. Instead, they danced through the sky like deadly artists painting pictures with their movements. Commander Hughes sat in his F-22 fighter jet, gripping the controls tightly as he flew upside down under an alien ship. The alien pilot was used to fighting opponents who shot energy beams back and forth from long distances. He was not ready for Hughes' style of fighting. "Fox 2, Hughes said calmly into his radio as he fired a missile at point-blank range. The missile hit the alien fighter's engine, and the ship began spinning out of control. The alien pilot's last message was a confused scream about impossible flying paths. All around Earth's sky, the same thing happened again and again. Human pilots used fighting methods that had been developed through decades of air battles. They knew how to use speed, surprise, and clever tricks to beat enemies with better technology. The alien pilots had grown comfortable winning fights just by having superior weapons. They had forgotten how to really fight. The battle continued through the day and into the night. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships from both sides were destroyed. But something was becoming clear to Admiral Thekmore as he watched his tactical screens. His fleet was losing. Human ground forces also joined the fight. Missiles shot up from Earth's surface, guided by computers but flying like the metal rods, too fast and too unpredictable for alien shields to stop. Human ships that had been hidden on the dark side of Earth's moon suddenly appeared and attacked the hegemony fleet from behind. The human vessels were built completely differently from alien ships. Where galactic races preferred smooth, curved designs that looked elegant, human ships looked like flying fortresses. They were covered in thick armor and bristled with weapons. They looked ugly but proved incredibly hard to destroy. By the time Earth's sun set on the first day of battle, Admiral Thekmore stared at his damage reports in growing horror. 3 of his capital ships were gone, destroyed by creatures who supposedly could not even leave their own planet properly. 12 cruisers had been turned into floating wreckage. Nearly 100 of his best fighter pilots would never return home. Meanwhile, Earth's losses were serious but not devastating. The humans seemed able to replace their destroyed machines quickly and keep fighting. Thekmor realized with growing fear that everything the hegemony had believed about humans was wrong. This primitive world had not only survived their first attack, it was actually winning the battle. For the first time in his long military career, the admiral began to wonder if his mighty fleet might actually lose this war. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council happened quickly as scary news from the Sol system reached all the member worlds. The huge crystal chambers filled with worried aliens making nervous sounds as they shared shocking reports about what was happening at Earth. Intelligence Coordinator FY stood at the speaking platform, her long tentacles moving wildly as she felt very upset. She had spent days studying all the information about humans, and what she learned made her afraid. The humans, she said in a shaking voice, have been fighting wars for their entire history. Not just sometimes, they have been fighting constantly, always learning, always getting better at it. They have created 17 different ways to fight with flying machines. They have 43 different methods for attacking on the ground. Their weapons get better and better because they always compete with each other in ways we cannot understand. All around the chamber, alien representatives made sounds of shock and worry. They had never heard of a species that spent so much time and energy on warfare. Elder Velnaz sat quietly in her special chair, but her old eyes showed she was not surprised by this news. She only felt sad that the hegemony had not listened to her warnings. Her people's ancient stories had tried to tell them what would happen. The reports kept coming, and each one was more frightening than the last. Human military thinking assumed that every weapon could be stopped by another weapon. So they built weapons to stop the weapons that stopped their weapons, then they built weapons to stop those weapons too. It went on in an endless cycle of improvement. Their rail guns looked simple and old-fashioned, but the engineering was so perfect that they could punch through shields that were designed to stop the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. The humans had spent centuries making their basic ideas work better and better. Meanwhile, on Earth, something was happening that had never occurred before in human history. President Kim stood in front of the biggest meeting of world leaders ever held. The alien invasion had done something that hundreds of years of peace talks could never do. It had united all humans into one team. Starting today, President Kim announced to the room full of presidents and prime ministers and kings, every country will share all their military secrets with everyone else. All our defensive technology, all our weapons research, all our fighting methods, we will share everything. The alien threat has shown us that fighting each other was something we could no longer afford to do. General Park, who was now in charge of the new Unified Defense Command that combined all of Earth's militaries, explained their plan to fight back. The aliens think we will fight like every other species they have conquered before. But we are not going to do that. We are going to fight like humans. We change and improve quickly, we create new ideas, and we never fight in a fair or predictable way. 3 days later, the second wave of human attacks began. The hegemony expected the humans to hide and defend themselves desperately. Instead, they found coordinated attack strikes coming from directions they did not expect. Human spaceships that had been built very quickly but with brilliant designs came out from behind Earth's moon where they had been hiding. The Soul's Vengeance, commanded by Captain Lee, showed everyone how humans planned to fight this war. The ship was built like a flying castle instead of having the smooth, beautiful curves that most galactic species preferred for their ships. It could take incredible damage while flying straight toward enemy ships to fight them at very close range. All weapons, keep firing, Captain Lee ordered his crew. Show these aliens what happens when you make humans angry. The human ships fought completely differently from any enemy the hegemony had ever faced before. They used ramming attacks, flying their ships directly into enemy vessels. When their ships were badly damaged, they turned them into giant guided missiles and crashed them into alien ships. They used fighting methods that looked completely crazy until everyone saw how well they worked. Human pilots would fly damaged ships straight at alien vessels, knowing they would probably die, but also knowing their sacrifice would save their friends and hurt the enemy. This kind of thinking was completely foreign to alien military commanders who had never seen soldiers willing to give up their lives so easily for their cause. The aliens had advanced technology, but the humans had something more powerful, the willingness to do whatever it took to protect their home world. They treated every battle like a learning experience, quickly figuring out the aliens' weaknesses and finding new ways to exploit them. Admiral Thekmor watched his tactical displays with growing fear and confusion. His fleet was fighting against creatures who had somehow turned the act of making war into both a science and an art form. Every time his forces thought they understood human tactics, the humans would do something completely different and unexpected. The humans used their damaged ships as weapons, coordinated attacks from multiple directions at the same time, and seemed to have an endless supply of new ideas for causing destruction. They fought with a combination of brilliant planning and apparent madness that left alien commanders completely unable to predict what would happen next. For the first time in galactic history, a major military power was being systematically outfought by a species that had not even developed faster than light travel. Admiral Thekmore realized he was facing opponents who were simply better at warfare than anyone in his fleet, and this terrifying knowledge filled him with despair. The hegemony's top military leaders met on their biggest warship, a vessel so enormous it was like a floating city in space. Admiral Thekmore stood in front of all the fleet commanders, knowing his job and his people's honor depended on what happened next. "The humans," he said, his jaw muscles tight with anger and embarrassment, "have been more clever than we thought they would be. So I am bringing every single ship we have to this fight. Every warship, every soldier, every weapon in our entire military. We will crush Earth before these backward creatures can learn to travel between stars." What the Admiral did not know was that this decision would become the biggest military mistake in the history of the galaxy. The humans had not been sitting around doing nothing. In secret underground factories built deep beneath Earth's surface, human scientists and engineers had been working day and night. They took pieces of destroyed alien ships and studied them carefully. Then they combined alien technology with human engineering ideas. The results were weapons and ships that were frightening in how well they worked. Commander Sujin stood on the control bridge of the Busan Rising, which was humanity's first real spaceship designed for fighting among the stars. All around her, the crew worked with the focused attention that had become typical of humans during the war. They had examined every piece of broken alien ship they could find, learning exactly how their enemy's technology worked and where it was weak. "Enemy ship spotted at position 27 Mark 15, reported Tactical Officer Minute, reading his instruments. "It's a hegemony supership, about 12 times heavier than us." "Perfect," Sujin said with a smile that would have scared any alien who saw it. "Big ships are slow ships. Pilot, use attack pattern Delta 7. The Busan Rising flew straight toward the massive alien vessel. Most galactic space fleets preferred to attack in graceful, curved paths that looked beautiful and elegant. But the human ship flew directly at its target in what looked like a suicide attack. At the very last second, the human ship rolled over, showing its heavily armored back to the alien ship's weapons while its own guns shot at the alien vessel's thin belly armor. All across the solar system, similar battles were happening. Human ships were designed like flying tanks instead of beautiful spacecraft, and they proved almost impossible to destroy. They fought with a mix of brilliant tactics and apparent craziness that left alien commanders completely confused and unable to respond. The humans used three-dimensional thinking that most alien species had never learned. They treated the empty space between planets like a weapon. They created clouds of floating debris to hide behind while approaching enemy ships. They used the gravity of planets to slingshot their vessels to incredible speeds. They even turned their own damaged ships into giant bullets. Captain June commanded the Incheon's Wrath when his ship's engines were destroyed during a fierce battle. Instead of trying to escape, he ordered all remaining power to be sent to the front shields and the steering rockets. "Everyone hold on tight," he announced calmly to his crew over the ship's communication system. "We're going to show these aliens what happens when they trap a human in a corner." The Incheon's Wrath flew directly into the hegemony's main flagship at 17% of light speed. The crash was so bright and powerful that people on Earth's surface could see it as a new star that appeared and disappeared in a few seconds. Throughout the battle, human ships demonstrated fighting methods that no alien military had ever seen before. They would coordinate attacks from multiple directions at the same time, confusing enemy commanders who were used to more predictable battles. They used their smaller size and speed to dart in and out of range of alien weapons. When human ships were badly damaged, their crews did not give up or try to run away. Instead, they would turn their dying vessels into weapons, ramming them into enemy ships or using them to block alien attacks while other human ships escaped. The humans also used the environment of space itself as a tool of war. They would hide behind asteroids and attack when aliens were not expecting it. They used the radiation from the sun to blind alien senses. They even used pieces of destroyed ships as camouflage, making their vessels look like floating wreckage until it was too late for the aliens to defend themselves. By the time the Great Battle ended, the hegemony's entire Grand Fleet was floating in pieces throughout the Sol system. Hundreds of proud warships that had conquered dozens of worlds were now nothing but twisted metal and glowing gas clouds. But what happened next confused the surviving alien prisoners even more than the humans' incredible fighting skills. The same human ships that had just destroyed the Hegemony fleet began rescuing alien survivors from the wreckage. Human medical teams worked to save the lives of enemy soldiers who had been trying to kill them just hours before. This act of mercy toward defeated enemies was something most galactic species had never seen before. In most wars throughout the galaxy, losers were either killed or left to die in space. But the humans seemed to think that once the fighting was over, their enemies became people who needed help. The alien survivors could not understand this behavior. How could the same species that fought with such terrifying effectiveness also show such kindness to their defeated foes? It was a contradiction that would puzzle galactic military analysts for generations to come. Admiral Thekmore, floating in a rescue pod, stared out at the remains of his mighty fleet and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen such a worried and tense emergency meeting. Admiral Thekmore stood in front of all the alien representatives, but he no longer looked like the proud military leader he had been just weeks ago. His shoulders were bent down, his forearms hung at his sides, and he looked like a prisoner waiting to hear his punishment. His entire fleet was destroyed, his military career was over, and his people's reputation was ruined. The Hegemony, he said in a voice so quiet that the listening aliens had to strain to hear him, officially asks the Council to help us make peace with the humans of Earth. We give up. The enormous chamber exploded with shocked sounds from dozens of different alien species. Never in all of galactic history had a major military power been so completely defeated by a species that could not even travel faster than light. The meaning of this defeat was almost too big to understand. Elder Velnar stood up slowly from her special chair. Her ancient body seemed to carry the weight of prophecy that had finally come true. "I warned you," she said in a simple voice that everyone could hear clearly. "Some species cannot be conquered because they are impossible to defeat. They are made strong by war, hardened by fighting, and become more powerful with every challenge they face." The Council's discussion was suddenly interrupted by an announcement that sent shock waves through every alien delegate in the room. "Attention, Council members. We are getting a message from a human spaceship asking for permission to dock at our station." On the giant viewing screen, a spacecraft appeared that was clearly built by humans. It was smooth and well-designed, but it also looked incredibly strong and tough. Unlike the flowing, curved shapes that most galactic species preferred for their ships, this human vessel looked like it had been built to survive anything the universe could possibly do to it. 6 hours later, Ambassador Anna Young walked through the Council chamber's airlock door, followed by a small team of human diplomats. Her presence immediately commanded attention from every alien in the room. She was not physically intimidating, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone representing a species that had just completely changed how galactic warfare worked. "Honored Council members," she began, and her voice carried easily through the vast chamber, "I bring friendly greetings from the people of Earth and the United Nations. We understand there was some confusion about our planet's abilities and what we are capable of." A nervous sound that might have been laughter rippled through the assembled alien delegates. "Let me make our position clear," Ambassador Anna Young continued calmly. "We are not a species that likes to attack others. We prefer peaceful cooperation, sharing scientific knowledge, and working together for everyone's benefit. We have no desire to conquer other worlds or control other species." She paused and looked around the chamber at all the watching aliens. "However, we are very, very good at warfare when someone forces us to fight." This massive understatement sent what might have been amused sounds through several alien delegations, if the situation had not been so serious and frightening. "Earth officially asks to become a member of the Galactic Council," she announced. "We offer our technology, our knowledge, and our military protection to any member species that faces threats from outside enemies." The vote for human membership happened quickly and was completely unanimous. Not a single alien species wanted to risk being on the wrong side of human military creativity and innovation. As the official session ended, Elder Velnaz walked over to speak privately with the human ambassador. "Your species," she said quietly, "will change everything in this galaxy. You do not fight just to win battles. You fight to make sure your victory is complete and permanent." Ambassador Anna Young nodded thoughtfully as she considered the elder alien's words. "We learned a long time ago that the best way to make sure there is peace is to be so well prepared for war that no smart enemy would ever risk starting a fight with us." 3 months later, amazing changes had happened throughout the galaxy. The first defensive weapons platforms designed by humans were being installed around the home worlds of Council member species. These weapons were incredibly advanced, combining human engineering with alien technology in ways that created defensive systems more powerful than anything ever seen before. Admiral Thekmore, the former hegemony commander, found himself in a strange new job. The humans had offered him work as a strategic consultant after they studied his military records and tactical knowledge. He now helped design defenses against the kind of attacks his own people used to make. As he worked in his new office on a human space station, Thekmore thought about the terrible mistake his species had made. They had assumed that because humans could not travel between stars, they must be weak and easy to conquer. But they had been completely wrong. The galaxy had learned a very important lesson that would never be forgotten. Never assume that a species is militarily weak just because they have not developed space flight yet. This was especially true when that species had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare by fighting against itself. The humans were now part of the galactic community, and the universe had become a much safer place for everyone, as long as you were their friend. And after seeing what happened to the hegemony, every species in the galaxy was very eager to be friends with the humans.